Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. We just passed 960 subscribers. I really appreciate your guys' support so much, and I hope I continue to make great content you guys will enjoy in the future. Now, the good news just keeps on rolling in for the Kansas Jayhawks because Kevin McCullar, one of the last missing pieces for Kansas basketball, he's decided to return to Kansas, and he's withdrawn from the 2023 NBA draft. I'm going to go over whether I think that was the right move for Kevin McCullar to withdraw from the draft and come back to Kansas, and whether I think this officially makes Kansas the preseason #1 team in college basketball for next season. Now again, when I was talking about Mackenzie Mbako deciding between Kansas or Indiana, I said that he needed to go to Indiana more than likely because Indiana had the open roster spot available. And I know Kansas had an open roster spot as well, but that spot could have potentially been filled with Kevin McCullar. And I think that Mackenzie Mbako had a good feeling that Kevin McCullar was going to decide to return to the Kansas Jayhawks, so he decided to go to Indiana. Yes, that's a tough loss for Kansas, but that's the only bad news the Jayhawks have gotten in this offseason. Almost anybody that Kansas has wanted, they have gotten. You can make an argument they missed out on Harrison Ingram to North Carolina. That was a tough loss in the transfer. Well, again, losing Mackenzie Mbako, he was a great talent. Him going to Indiana is a tough loss, but Kevin McCullar coming back to the Kansas Jayhawks is huge, and I had a feeling that he would. And I think this is the right decision for Kevin McCullar because he's not currently projected in either round of the 2023 NBA draft. He's going to be a fifth-year senior this year. And yes, it is tough for seniors to be drafted, but players like Jalen Wilson, another senior on the Kansas Jayhawks this past year, he's going to be drafted in the NBA this year. And you also look at other players like Trace Jackson Davis and Marcus Sasser. They're also seniors, and they're going to be drafted as well. So you can be drafted. But looking at Kevin McCullar's statistics, he's just not a guy that the NBA is probably going to take a pick on. As a senior, an older player in college basketball, they're going to want to take a chance on a younger player that has more potential. So for Kevin McCullar coming back to Kansas, it's a smart move because you're going to potentially be on a national championship winning team. And also he's going to be able to make a lot of NIL at Kansas because Kansas has one of the best NIL operations in college basketball. Kevin McCullar will be one of the better players on Kansas next year. So it's a great move by Kevin McCullar. Maybe next year after he's finally out of eligibility after his last season in college basketball, maybe Kevin McCullar can sneak into the NBA as an undrafted free agent. But since the fact that he's more likely would not have been drafted this year, this is a fantastic move by Kevin McCullar to return to Kansas. He'll make a lot of NIL financially at Kansas, and he'll potentially be a part of another team that has a chance to win a national title again at the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, does this make Kansas the top team in college basketball for next season? I think you have to have them in the preseason as the #1. I don't know if they're going to be able to win it all next year. Nobody knows this far out. We don't know if injuries are going to happen or if some other team emerges as an even better team in college basketball next year. It's way too early to tell, but as it stands, Kansas should be the preseason #1 team in college basketball, and they also should be the preseason top team in the Big 12 by far because no other team in the Big 12 is returning what Kansas is returning. Yes, they're losing Grady Dick and they're losing Jalen Wilson. Those are tough losses to the NBA draft, but look what Kansas has returning. They've got DeJuan Harris back. He's a really experienced point guard that has been improving year over year for Kansas. He's a guy that I think could take an even bigger step forward this season. They're also bringing in Nick Timberlake, a transfer portal guard from Towson, which really alleviates the Harrison Ingram loss to the North Carolina Tar Heels. Still, Harrison Ingram would have been nice, but Nick Timberlake, he is a really solid guard addition through the transfer portal with Towson. You're also bringing back now Kevin McCullar at the 3, which alleviates that Mackenzie Mbako loss to Indiana. Kevin McCullar might not be as talented as Mackenzie Mbako and the amount of potential Mackenzie Mbako has, but Kevin McCullar, he's a fifth-year senior coming into the season. He has some of the most experience of any player in college basketball. He played at Texas Tech for a couple seasons, so he's a guy with tons of experience, and I think that will bode really well for Kansas next year with having one of the most experienced players in college basketball. He averaged 11 points per game this past season, 7 rebounds, and a couple of assists. He only shot 30% from 3, but he shot 45% from the field and around 76% from the free throw line. Those are not bad shooting statistics. The three-point line could improve, but with Kansas having Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson this past year shooting the 3-ball, they didn't need Kevin McCullar to shoot that great at the three-point line, and I think that Kansas will have some really good shooters this season as well, so I don't necessarily think Kevin McCullar has to improve that much from the three-point line, but maybe if Kevin McCullar does just a little bit from the three-point line, it could really help raise his potential draft stock for next season in college basketball. They also have KJ Adams coming back, and he's a guy that does not need to play center for Kansas because he is undersized, but he's a guy that is really starting to show his potential, and he's getting better year over year. And then Kansas brought in Hunter Dickinson, the transfer portal center from the Michigan Wolverines. He's 7'1", and he can step out and shoot threes, which I think will help KJ Adams play more inside, and also you could have Kevin McCullar on the glass pass as well and not have to have those guys shoot that well from the three-point line, because Hunter Dickinson can take care of that. He's a fantastic player. Looking at that starting five, look at the experience. There's over 500 games started between all 5 of these players in college basketball. Kansas is some of the most experienced of any team in the sport. They might not have maybe the most talented team on paper with their starting 5, but what Kansas potentially lacks in talent in the starting 5, they've got some talent coming off the bench. But Kansas, they've got an experienced starting 5, and in college basketball, you need experience. And just Kevin McCullar Jr., Hunter Dickinson, and DeJuan Harris alone, plus adding Nick Timberlake as well, is some of the most experience of any team in college basketball. And then you look at the bench. Kansas is bringing in a fantastic recruiting class with Elmarco Jackson, a 5-star guard, who could potentially have started for Kansas next year if Kevin McCullar wasn't returning. I think that the starting 5 for Kansas will be DeJuan Harris, Nick Timberlake, Kevin McCullar, KJ Adams, and Hunter Dickinson. So Elmarco Jackson probably will come off the bench, but that will be really good for him to be able to learn behind some really experienced players, to be able to probably be that 6th man off the bench, unless Arterio Morris is that guy, the transfer portal guard from Texas. Kansas is bringing in him as well. He's a really talented player. You know he wants to start, but he wants to be on a winning team, and he could potentially learn behind those guys as well. But Kansas also has Chris Johnson, Marcus Adams Jr., and Jamari McDowell, all players in their freshman class that are really talented players. And that's not even to mention that Parker Brown, the brother of Christian Brown, has decided to transfer to Kansas as well. And he might not even have a big role on Kansas's team next year, but you know he's going to want to chip in and contribute as much as he possibly can for the Kansas Jayhawks next season. Again, this is one of the most talented classes coming in college basketball, and to pair that with the experience that Kansas has brought in through the transfer portal and with their returning players, it is insane how good the Kansas Jayhawks will be. And yes, with having so much talent and experience on your team makes you lose players through the transfer portal. Kansas lost MJ Rice, Ernest Uday, and Zuby Ejiofor, some really talented players that could have been able to maybe improve, but they were not able to ever get any playing time. They decided to enter the transfer portal. But one team's loss is another team's gain, and those players will definitely help out other teams in college basketball next year. But looking at all the talent and experience Kansas has on their roster, the Jayhawks have to be the preseason #1 team in college basketball for next season, and the top team in the Big 12. There is no doubt about it. This is a fantastic team. Bill Self has done a great job assembling this roster together. He's done it year over year, and Kansas might not have the most talented team in college basketball for next year in their starting 5, but they make up for that with talent coming off the bench. But they've got the most experience, and experience wins championships. You look at Remy Martin, what he did for Kansas a couple years ago, helping them off the bench win a championship. So Kansas will have a great chance to win a national championship this year. This is a really great team, and Kevin McCullar's return is the icing on the cake to help ease off that Mackenzie Mbako loss. And Kevin McCullar made the right decision to return to Kansas. I think that he will make a lot of NIL next year and be able to help potentially contribute to a national championship contending team in college basketball for next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Kevin McCullar returning to the Kansas Jayhawks by withdrawing from the 2023 NBA Draft. Whether you think he made the right decision to withdraw from the draft, and whether you think the Kansas Jayhawks could potentially be the best team in college basketball next season. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.